Hey guys, number one Marmaduke fan here. These are just going to be like quick little perfunctory reviews. So, taking a look at Pokemon Adventures Volume 11. When I read Volume 10, something I said is I didn't quite know what Crystal's vibe was. I guess my overall review for this series is it's one of the best all ages kids manga I've ever read. I've never read the Gold and Silver arc before, so this is my first time through it. And just as I was criticizing it and wondering, all right, is it time to dip out? I think you should look at it just for how good Hidenori Kusaka is at plotting. It's kind of unusual for there to be a writer-artist team in manga. The standard for manga seems to be the artist is the writer and creator of the series. So it seems like whenever there's a writer-artist combo, like it's sort of like the writer feels like he has to step it up because that's not standard for the industry. And you can tell he does a lot of extra work researching the Pokemon games for inspiration and a lot of really like nicely tightly done stuff with plotting, like always making sure to bring in other little elements. And it's pretty ambitious because there have been multiple protagonists, and the protagonist changes every few volumes. So Crystal's basic vibe, because each of these little kid characters has something distinct about them, is Crystal isn't an expert fighter, but she is an expert catcher. So whereas most of the other characters, they want to become the champion, they want to beat their rival, Crystal specifically has a job to do, which is to help Professor Oak complete the Pokedex, which none of the others have really cared that much about. So what do you give her as a problem? You give her a Pokemon that's extremely hard to catch, and that's kind of like the ultimate test of her abilities. And it's almost like there's a battle of wits between her and this legendary Pokemon, where she kind of has to predict its thinking and predict its movements as she's pursuing it. Ultimately, that one gets away, and she feels a little crushed by this, and it starts to affect her ability to just catch Pokemon normally. It's sort of like it's sort of like when a really good pitcher in baseball messes up a game and then they get something wrong with their head, and that becomes like a string of defeats, which is great because there's always there's this literal connection between Pokemon and baseball where you throw the ball at the thing. They're really good at bringing in sort of real life parallels to these problems. So Crystal, who we were introduced to as like a really competent trainer who already has her team, who already seems on top of her game. Now we're seeing her struggling and having a problem. So goofy thing, we meet her mom, and her mom is kind of like dressed in, I don't know what the style is called, like maybe Lolita or something, but her mom is kind of dressed in like clothes that are way too young for a woman her age. And she's kind of she just seems like a joke at first, but she's actually like really serious and kind of a tough but loving mom, where she just gives her the tough talk. Look, you took on a job, right? So that means that this isn't something where you just don't feel like doing it. If you accept a job, that means that it's your duty or your responsibility to complete it. So Crystal goes back to basics and tries to like train like she did at the start of her journey. And what we learn about Crystal is when she was a little kid, she broke her arms, which is why she uses karate kicks as her like distinctive Pokemon catching technique. Meanwhile, we have some of the older cast members woven back in. So some of the older plots with like the evil villains running around and red, blue, and yellow show up again. They even do the classic gag where you can never tell someone's age in the manga. So Yellow shows up and Crystal assumes that Yellow's a boy, of course. And then Crystal finds out that Yellow is older than her, and that freaks her out. And then what? She's 11? No, what's wrong with you, Japan? Why does nobody look the age they actually are? What's wrong with you? But anyway, and then it kind of leaves off with the promise that we're going to see Gold and Silver again, our protagonist from a few volumes ago, and the whole team's going to come together for some big epic climax. I learned a little bit reading Hidenori Kusaka's commentary. It's often been said that Pokemon Adventures is a unique manga. It's serialized in three magazines, has lots of story arcs, several lead characters, etc. That's really wild. Like, can you imagine trying to get someone to follow a story across multiple magazines? Like, were they publishing them simultaneously? Anyway, and then Satoshi Yamamoto just has some nice commentary about how cool it is to work under Hidenori Kusaka. So it addressed directly the problem I had with Volume 10. Kusaka is like really good at plotting and bringing various threads together, and even juggling a wide cast of characters and giving them all their time in the light. So I'm interested to see in what direction that develops. A couple Western comics, Absorbing Man. It's his first issue. It's a reprint of Journey into Mystery number 114. So the old Thor comics. It's written by Stan Lee, so it's got his great purple prose, and it's drawn with Purple Passion by Jack Kirby and inked by Chick Stone. So I'd call this like a quintessential, like goofy Marvel book, you know, with like Kirby's over-the-top expressions and ugly bad guys and Lee's purple prose. It's just that's it. It's a fun, goofy issue where Thor has to fight a bad guy who gets stronger whenever he's close to someone with superpowers. So that's kind of cool. And I like that finally we have like the classic coloring on this. I've seen like a million ads for the collector's edition of this where they do like the gross 3D airbrushing coloring techniques. That doesn't work with Jack Kirby's style. Jack Kirby's style is kind of rough and very 2D and sharp and angular. It doesn't work if you make it look all painted in 3D. But this coloring looks nice and flat and simple. Wytches was written by Scott Snyder. Rob Schneider. I like Scott Snyder. I've liked every Batman comic I've read by him. The art is by Jock, who I've never heard of before. And the color is by, I think it's Matthew or Brian. There it is, Matt Hollinsworth. And I've seen Matt Hollinsworth's color before. Let me see if I can find a page. This is kind of a pretty R-rated book. I'm going to flip to the back, actually. So here you can see Hollinsworth's color, and he does things like paint splats, which is kind of cool. It's mostly cool when he uses it to emphasize something like, oh, someone's getting their neck broken by the evil witches. So he puts a bunch of paint splats in. But then there'll be other times where it just feels like, oh, he just put a paint splat there over the art, and it doesn't quite fit with the rest of what he's doing. So it's kind of a neat technique. I feel like, though, sometimes a neat technique can fight with the total effect. And I kind of see a colorist's job is mostly to serve the black and white artist. Like an ideal colorist, you shouldn't even notice them, in my humble opinion. So I guess it's kind of like a two-sided thing. I appreciate that Hollinsworth is doing some experimental painterly stuff with his coloring. Sometimes it works, but other times it feels like he just, I don't know, you need another layer or something, or it literally just looks like what it is, big splat right on top of his work. Story-wise, which is a very scary hard R-rated horror story. So I'm actually not comfortable giving this one away. I usually give away these $1 comics as little freebies in the little free library. This is less like, what's an R-rated movie? Okay, so like The Shining is an R-rated movie, and it's very scary, but it won't like, you don't see like, you see some people killed in The Shining, but it's not like Saw or like a slasher flick where the whole point is to watch bodies getting crushed and ripped apart and snapped in two and all that stuff. So that's like the negative. I don't know if I call that a negative thing. That's the scary kind of limiting thing about that. If you don't have a stomach for like really gruesome violence, that's not going to work. So let's talk about some of the things I did like. Snyder talks about this in his commentary. He's taking inspiration from like his childhood days, walking around in the woods and finding abandoned trucks and cabins and things, which is a really good source of inspiration for horror stories. I think I've told this story, talked about this before, but I had like this weird childhood. Like my parents wanted to raise us out in the country, so we lived basically in the woods surrounded by farmers. So I could literally go out and explore in like in a smallish wood. It was small enough that I could never get seriously lost and not find my way home, but it was large enough that I could pretend I was lost in the woods. And that was like a really cool experience, but it was also kind of terrifying. It's a little bit terrifying to be out in the woods. Things like the Blair Witch Project, Slender Man, they all kind of tap into this primal fear of the woods. So that fits nicely. And then Snyder also has the idea that, like cartoon witches with warty noses, they're not that scary, but maybe if you go back to maybe a more primal or satanic idea of witches as, black magic, or maybe just some sort of like forest spirit that we don't understand, you can make witches scary again. It's a very straightforward story. We get like a little view of what the witches might be like as a poor person gets dispatched. And then we get a little glimpse of this family with kind of like a corny, dad joke dad who's worried about his daughter. He's working as an artist. The mom is injured. The teenage daughter has some kind of trauma where she saw someone die under mysterious circumstances. And we learned that maybe the witches are connected to this mean bully of hers that died. And we don't know for sure. Like, did the girl sacrifice her bully to the witches as a way of getting back at her? Did the witches do it on their own and she has no memory of what the heck went on? And then we're left with kind of like a little creepy hint at the end that maybe this family is being haunted by something. It's very genuinely creepy, and it's doing that good job of like making a scary story scary. I didn't enjoy kind of the more like, I don't like seeing human bodies snapped apart and stuff like that. My general preference is if you imply it, that's scary enough all by itself, even without showing it. Just the indication of people dying horribly is enough to evoke an idea of fear in the mind. And that's it. So the violence was a little gruesome for me, but in terms of introducing a character and introducing like a really good primal fear for a horror story, I'll give Scott's props for that. There was also some weird like sex stuff. There was like the bully who was teasing the teenage girl had like this weird like threatening her to do sexual stuff, and I'm going to record it and humiliate you with the video of it. And then the witches came in and killed the bully. So it feels to me like Snyder's just kind of throwing all of his, like hard R X-rated ideas into this to make it edgier. And it's okay to tone it down a little, even in horror, even in a story with like really graphic, evil. That's the hard thing for me, is I believe in portraying evil as evil and being honest about that. I'm not comfortable putting this into the free library system like I used to. So what am I going to do with it? I think I'll hold on to it because it's not a bad comic. I don't want to rip it or throw it away because that's what I do to really bad comics, but it's also too scary for me to give away. So that's staying in my collection kind of by default. But Absorber Man, I'm okay giving that one away. Some kid will get a kick out of that. And I'm holding on to this because these are hard to find. That's it. I'm a Marmaduke fan. I love you guys. Catch you later.